I can tell you the exact moment everything changed. It wasn't a screaming match or a shocking text message. It wasn't anything so cinematic. Just one sentence, dropped casually over a salad course, in a house that smelled like lemon polish and generational wealth. So, was Newport as amazing as Jared said it was? The words came from across the table. Madeline's younger sister, Layla, 23 and perpetually oversharing. She said it between bites of grilled asparagus, like it was nothing, like the name Jared was supposed to mean nothing to me. But to me, it felt like a trapdoor opening under my feet. I remember everything after that moving in slow motion. My fork stalled an inch above my plate. The smile I'd been faking for most of the dinner froze on my face. I glanced at Madeline, who didn't flinch, not at first. Then she let out a light laugh, one of those rehearsed, breezy deflections she did whenever Layla put her foot in her mouth. "Oh no, Lay, you're thinking of someone else. That was back in June, right?" Madeline tilted her head like she was trying to jog her sister's memory. "I was in San Diego that weekend. That was the AI conference. I sent you guys pics. Remember?" Layla blinked, looking like she was trying to cross-reference dates in her brain. "Ha!" she said, confused but not enough to dig. "Weird. Jared was definitely talking about Newport last week. Said something about the cliffs and your hair in the wind." She squinted, then shrugged. "Whatever. Must have been someone else." Everyone chuckled. Someone changed the subject. Her father launched into a story about golfing in Pebble Beach with a senator. Her mother offered more wine. The conversation moved on, exactly how Madeline intended it to. But I couldn't. I sat there, trying to smile, nodding along to a story I wasn't listening to, all while my thoughts screamed in every direction. Jared, Newport, your hair in the wind. Madeline was in San Diego that weekend. She'd sworn she was. I remember the itinerary she'd sent me, the corporate logo at the top, the hour-by-hour agenda of panel discussions and networking mixers. She'd FaceTimed me from the hotel lobby, said the Wi-Fi was spotty, told me she missed me, asked me to feed the dog. I'd believed every word. Now, all I could picture was her standing on a cliff in Newport, smiling at someone else. Jared, a name I didn't recognize, a name that sounded like it didn't belong in our life, but apparently did. The rest of that dinner was a masterclass in pretending. I laughed when I was supposed to. I passed the truffle potatoes. I even complimented her mother's new chandelier, because that's what I did. I played my part. I always had. But my body was humming, my skin hot, my palms cold. Something had just ruptured inside me, and I didn't know what to do with it. Later that night, when we got home, she was all over me, laughing about her mom's backhanded comments, teasing me about how her dad called me Eli the mechanic, like I worked at a Jiffy Lube. I smiled. I pretended. I watched her peel off her dress and toss it over a chair like she hadn't just rewritten our history with a single denial. She climbed into bed and curled up against me, completely unbothered. But I didn't sleep. Not really. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths, wondering if she was dreaming about cliffs and ocean air and someone named Jared. By sunrise, I had made my decision. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation. No yelling. No demanding the truth. I didn't wake her up. I didn't even leave a note. I just packed a bag. Not a lot, just the essentials. A change of clothes. My laptop. My grandfather's watch. I took one last look at her. Asleep in tangled sheets, mouth slightly open, one hand curled under her cheek like she had no idea what she'd done. Or maybe she knew. Maybe she was just that good at compartmentalizing. At lying. I closed the bedroom door behind me and walked out of the life we'd built. It was just after 7 a.m. when I reached the airport. I sat in the back of a rideshare, the driver humming along to Fleetwood Mac, and I stared out the window as we passed early joggers and school buses and sleepy cafes. Everything looked normal. Everything was still moving. Only I wasn't. When the driver asked, "Where to?" I told him, "Seattle, Tacoma." He raised an eyebrow. "That's pretty far." I nodded. "I don't mind." He didn't ask questions after that. The drive north took hours and I welcomed every mile. I needed the road. The motion. I needed distance, not just from Madeline, but from the version of me who had ignored all the signs. The late-night phone calls she took in the bathroom. The sudden work trips. The way she'd started calling me babe instead of my name, like a placeholder in case she got us mixed up. I thought about the version of myself who had defended her when friends raised eyebrows. She's just busy, I'd said. Work's been insane. I thought about the version of me who'd ordered flowers to her hotel, only to be told they'd never been delivered because there was no reservation under her name. I'd believed her when she said the hotel must have messed up. I'd believed her every time. By the time we pulled up to the terminal, the sun was high, and I was running on caffeine and adrenaline. I bought a one-way ticket to Seattle without thinking. I didn't know what I'd do when I got there. I just knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep pretending. I found a quiet seat at the gate, plugged in my phone, and stared at the boarding screen until the letters blurred. Around me, travelers laughed, children argued over snacks, a couple bickered about overhead space. Life went on. Mine had just cracked open, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to stop lying to myself. The airport was humming with noise, but I couldn't hear any of it. Just the replay of that dinner over and over. Layla's voice. That name. Jared. The ease with which Madeline laughed it off, like she'd practiced the denial in the mirror. The worst part was how quickly everyone accepted it. No one blinked. No one questioned it. Except me. As the plane climbed into the sky, leaving California behind, I stared out the window and started stitching together everything I'd ignored. The nights she stayed late prepping decks for investor meetings, even when she wasn't on a client account. The do not disturb energy she carried when I tried to sit close during her calls. The second phone she claimed was for work emergencies, but never left her side. The bathroom breaks during movies, the way she always took her phone with her, like someone might text at 9:45 p.m. on a Sunday night with a budget emergency. At the time, I convinced myself I was paranoid. I didn't want to be the jealous husband. I didn't want to become that guy who checked her location or asked who she was texting. That wasn't me, or at least it hadn't been. But as the clouds rolled by beneath us, and the miles stretched between us, every little detail started to make horrifying sense. I remembered the time we'd gone to her firm's holiday party, and I'd overheard her tell someone I was in automotive. That wasn't a lie, technically. I did own a garage. I restored cars, taught teens how to drive, and kept locals on the road. It was honest work. But the way she said it, like she was embarrassed, like she was trying to soften me down for the investors and hedge fund execs, as if the truth might stain her narrative. That night, when I asked about it, she'd smiled and kissed my cheek. "Babe," she said, "I'm just trying to keep things simple. They don't need our whole backstory. Our backstory. The one where I helped her move into her first studio apartment when she landed that analyst job. The one where I covered rent for both of us the year she got laid off. The one where I cheered her on during endless nights of online grad school while holding down 2 jobs. But I'd become inconvenient. A footnote in her curated version of success. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes. The turbulence wasn't from the plane. It was the crash of clarity, sudden and brutal. She'd started changing about a year ago. It wasn't obvious at first. Just small things. Shorter texts, fewer jokes, more evenings spent catching up on work. We used to eat dinner together almost every night. Then it became takeout for one. Then it became silence. She'd smile, kiss my forehead, tell me she was just tired. That work was *ling her. That it was a rough quarter. I believed her, because I loved her, because I thought marriages had seasons, and maybe we were just in a winter. But winter had turned to ice. And eventually, I stopped asking her to come to bed. I stopped reaching for her hand in the car. I stopped waiting up. I had 100 chances to see it, 1,000 little signs. But I didn't want to know, because knowing meant everything would change. Now everything had. When I landed in Seattle, I didn't feel free. I felt disoriented, like I'd stepped out of one reality and into another, where I no longer had a home or a wife, just unanswered questions. I booked a cheap hotel room in Tacoma, not because I had any connection there, but because it felt far enough from everything familiar. The room was cold, smelled faintly of bleach, and had exactly one lamp that flickered when you turned it on. I didn't care. I just needed a place to exist while I figured out what the hell to do next. I lay on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed beside me, a text from Madeline. "Hey babe. Sorry I had to run this morning, early call with Sydney team. Hope everything's okay." I stared at the screen. The words looked so normal, so painfully routine. Hope everything's okay. Like I hadn't just walked out on our life. Like she hadn't just rewritten reality at a dinner table. I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a walk. Past a strip mall, a closed comic book store, and an old diner with a neon sign that blinked open even though it clearly wasn't. Everything felt eerily still, like the world was taking a breath and waiting for me to decide who I was going to be next. And the truth was, I didn't know. I wasn't ready to tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my friends. Not even Marco, my business partner and best friend since college. Because what could I say? Hey, turns out my wife's been lying about her business trips and might be having an affair with someone named Jared. Want to grab a beer? No. I needed proof. Not just to show others. To show myself. Because some part of me, the wreckage that still loved her, wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. That Layla had remembered the wrong weekend. That Jared was some gay coworker she forgot to mention. That the cliffs and the hair and the lie were just a coincidence. So I opened my laptop. I hadn't used our shared cloud account in months. She'd moved to a private work drive ages ago. But we'd kept this one for photos, files, the occasional invoice. She probably thought I'd forgotten it existed. She hadn't wiped it. Not completely. And that's when I saw the folder. Hidden in a subfolder called Archive Costa, buried under layers of client decks and old tax PDFs, was a video file. No title. No description. Just a date. The same weekend she told me she was in San Diego. I didn't open it at first. Just stared at the timestamp. My chest tightened, fingers hovering above the trackpad. Some part of me was begging not to look, to keep the uncertainty, to pretend. But I clicked. The screen lit up with sunshine. Ocean behind her. Madeline on a balcony, smiling, laughing. She turns the camera around, selfie style, and a man steps into the frame. Brown hair, a sharp jawline, confident, too confident. He leans in, kisses her neck. She doesn't stop him. She films it, herself. A full minute of betrayal, set against the most beautiful backdrop imaginable. When the video ended, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just stared at the screen, the silence around me deafening. I hadn't just lost a marriage. I'd lost a version of my life that never really existed. And that realization was both shattering and clarifying. I closed the laptop, sat on the edge of the motel bed, and let out a slow breath. No more guessing. No more benefit of the doubt. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It had been right there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. After I closed the laptop, I didn't move for a long time. There was no cathartic outburst. No yelling. No breaking things. It wasn't like the movies. It was worse because it was quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around you when there's nothing left to fight for. I sat there on the edge of that stiff motel bed in Tacoma, staring down at my hands like they belonged to someone else. Hands that once fixed Madeline's kitchen sink. Hands that had held her when she got the call about her grandmother passing. Hands that built our first IKEA bed together while she read the instructions and laughed every time I cursed at a stripped screw. Now they just rested on my knees, empty. I'd seen enough. There was no way to unsee the video. Her laugh. His hands. That balcony. The way she framed the sh*T. Steady, deliberate. Like she wanted to remember it. Like she wanted to own it. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't tricked. She was present. A willing participant in a moment that had no space for me. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under a halogen lamp. A couple argued next to their car. A teenager rode past on a skateboard, earbuds in, oblivious to the grief inside room 214. It struck me how normal the world looked. how unchanged it was by the collapse of mine. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Madeline. Just checking in. You good? That was it. No question mark this time. Just 3 words. So simple. So sterile. Like she was texting a coworker after a meeting. You good? I laughed. Actually laughed. Because how the hell do you even answer something like that? No, I'm not good. I'm unraveling in a motel on the edge of a state you've never even been to. I just watched you kiss a man I've never met, in a place you told me didn't exist. And I don't even have the energy to scream about it. But I didn't type any of that. I didn't reply at all. Instead, I powered off the phone and slid it into the drawer next to the Gideon Bible. Let it sit there in the dark for a while. It had done enough damage for one day. For the rest of the night, I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, as if undressing would make it too real. I didn't sleep, not really. Just drifted in and out of half-conscious thoughts. Replayed moments from the past year with new eyes. The business trip she said she extended by a day. Maybe that was him. The time she claimed she left her necklace at the gym and had to run back. Maybe that was him too. It was like watching your favorite movie and realizing your favorite character was the villain all along. The next morning, I woke up to gray light leaking through the curtains. My mouth was dry. My back ached from the hard bed. But my mind felt still. Not clear exactly, but settled like a puzzle had snapped into place. I took a shower that lasted too long. Let the water beat down on me like it could scrub the images from my mind. Didn't. Then I packed. Not to go back. Not to run. But to move forward wherever that led. I didn't know what came next. I just knew I couldn't keep orbiting around a lie. I grabbed my bag and walked to the front desk. The clerk gave me a sympathetic smile. The kind people give when they don't know your story but can tell it's heavy. You checking out? Yeah. Hope everything was okay. It was what it needed to be. I meant that. Outside, I stood on the curb and let the cold air hit my skin. It helped. The sky was smeared with clouds, but the streets were dry. I walked without a destination, just following my feet. A part of me didn't want to check in anywhere. I just wanted to exist without having to explain anything to anyone. Eventually, I found a little cafe off a side street. It was quiet, warm. The kind of place with mismatched mugs and a bulletin board full of lost pets and guitar lessons. I ordered a black coffee and took it to the window seat. No cream, no sugar, just bitter and simple. I watched the town wake up. People walking dogs, opening shops, starting days they hadn't earned with lies. And that's when I opened the laptop again. I didn't go back to the video. I deleted it. Not because I wanted to forget. I knew I never would. But because I didn't need to relive it. The moment had done its job. It had told the truth. The kind you don't argue with. The kind that sits in your bones. Instead, I opened a blank document and wrote 3 lines. I know. I saw the video. Please don't contact me. That's all I needed to say. I saved it. Not to send, but to remind myself that I had said it. That I had claimed the reality. That I wasn't pretending anymore. For years, I'd let small doubts pile up like unread emails. Flagged, but never opened. The way she'd correct me in front of her friends. The way she made me sound like a project. Someone she'd fixed. I used to think love meant accepting those little things. Now I saw it for what it was, erosion. Slow, quiet, constant. She hadn't just cheated on me with Jared. She'd been cheating reality for months. And I'd let her. That was the part that stung the most. Not the betrayal, but how complicit I'd been in avoiding the signs. How badly I'd wanted the illusion to be true. How many times I'd swallowed my gut instincts because I was afraid of what they'd confirm. I sipped my coffee and watched an elderly man struggle to parallel park. He reminded me of my high school driver's ed teacher, Mr. Wilcox. Used to tell us, confidence is the difference between a wide turn and a wreck. I never understood that until now. I'd been making wide turns for years. Now I was ready to drive straight. I opened a map on my laptop. No destination in mind. Just possibilities. I needed somewhere with quiet. Somewhere no one knew my name. Somewhere I could rebuild without eyes watching to see how gracefully I fell apart. My eyes drifted north. along the coast, past Olympia, past Aberdeen, to a little town I hadn't thought about in years. Astoria. I passed through it once in my 20s during a road trip. I remembered the fog, the hills, the smell of salt. It felt like the edge of the world, and maybe that's what I needed. I booked a rental, a cabin just outside town, near the Columbia River. It wasn't much, one bedroom, patchy Wi-Fi, no TV, but it had a wood stove and windows that faced the water. I texted one person, Marco, taking some time. I'll be out of pocket for a bit. I'll call when I'm settled. His reply came 5 minutes later. You okay? I typed, deleted, then finally replied, I will be. That was the truth. Not yet, but I would be. I gathered my things, paid for the coffee, and stepped outside. I didn't look back. The drive to Astoria took longer than expected. Not because of traffic, but because I didn't want to rush it. I stopped in small towns, ate at diners with cracked menus, filled up at gas stations where people still made eye contact. Every time I pulled over, I felt a little lighter. Every mile away from Denver felt like a piece of Madeline's shadow falling off my back. I reached Astoria on a Wednesday afternoon. The rain had just let up, leaving the streets slick and shining under a watery sun. Fog hung low on the hills, like the town was still waking up. There was something quiet about it, not the kind of quiet that felt hollow, but the kind that felt earned. The cabin was exactly what the listing promised, plain, functional, slightly crooked. The wood stove smelled like cedar, and the front porch looked out onto a stretch of the Columbia River so wide and gray it looked like a second sky. For the first few days, I didn't do much. I unpacked, took long walks, read the old paperbacks left in the cabinet, slept more than I had in months. There was a rhythm to the silence. It didn't ask anything of me. And then one morning, I woke up and realized I needed something to do, not to distract myself, but to remember who I was before I became someone else's disappointment. So I went into town. Astoria wasn't big. A few thousand people. A main street with a mix of antique stores, cafes, and local businesses. No Whole Foods, no high-rises, no designer boutiques. Just a place where people lived and worked and waved at each other. I walked past an old garage with a rusted sign out front, Weller's Auto since 1964. The door was open. Inside, a guy in his 60s was under the hood of a pickup, humming along to an AM radio station playing Creedence. I leaned in. You hiring? He looked up, wiped his hands on a towel, and gave me a once-over. Depends. You any good with carburetors? Depends, I said. You working on anything built before 1990? That made him smile. Come by tomorrow. Bring your tools. That's how it started. A few hours a day at first. Fixing things. Replacing belts. Diagnosing rattles. Nothing fancy, nothing high-tech, just simple, honest work. The kind of work where you didn't have to explain yourself. I found a rhythm. Mornings at the garage. Afternoons walking the river trail. Evenings cooking basic meals and reading books I'd meant to get to for years. The quiet that had once felt like an escape started to feel like home. But it was teaching that changed things. It happened by accident. One morning, I noticed a flyer on the post office corkboard. Need help learning to drive. Nervous teens seeking patient instructor. We'll pay hourly. Call or text Nora and then a number written in Sharpie. I stared at it for a long moment. I hadn't taught in years, not since the early days of the garage back in Denver. But something about it pulled at me. I texted the number. Hi Nora. I'm Eli. I've taught people to drive before. If you're still looking, I can help. She replied within minutes. Yes. Please. I failed my test 2x already. My mom's gonna lose it. Our first lesson was awkward. She was 17, skittish behind the wheel and apologizing every 5 minutes. But she listened. She tried. And after 45 minutes of driving in loops around an empty high school parking lot, she parallel parked without hitting a single cone. She fist-pumped. I smiled. And for the first time in months, I felt something stir in my chest that wasn't dread. The next day, I printed a few flyers of my own. Driving lessons, patient, local, experienced. All ages welcome. Reasonable rates. Text Eli. Number. I taped them up in grocery stores, the public library, even at the laundromat. I didn't expect much. But the calls came. A retired vet who hadn't driven in years after an accident. A single mom who was too nervous to take the highway. A kid who'd failed his test 4 times and just wanted to stop disappointing his dad. They came, one by one. And with each lesson, I started to remember who I was when no one was watching. There was no Madeline here. No Jared. No curated dinner parties or startup jargon. Just me, a car, and someone trying to trust themselves again. And that, I realized, was what I had lost in my marriage, not just her trust, but my own. Every time she lied and I let it slide, I chipped away at my own gut instincts. Every time I swallowed suspicion and smiled through it, I was telling myself that doubt meant weakness. That silence meant love. But it didn't. Love meant presence. Truth. The kind of truth that showed up even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it made things messy. In Astoria, the mess was mine, but so was the clarity. At night, I started sleeping through till morning. Not always peacefully, but without the heaviness in my chest. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. I even deleted the old shared drive where I'd found the video. That chapter was closed. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching the river from my porch, wondering what she was doing. If she ever came clean. If she thought about the way it all ended, me slipping out before dawn, no fight, no drama. Just absence. But I didn't stay in that thought long. Because it didn't matter anymore. She had her story. I had mine. And mine was no longer about her. By the time the leaves started to turn, my schedule was full. I wasn't trying to build anything. Not really. At first, it was just about staying busy. One driving student led to 2, then to 5, and by the end of October, I was booking lessons a week in advance. Word got around that I was patient, that I didn't yell, that I knew when to talk and when to just let people breathe. It turns out most people don't need a driving instructor so much as they need someone who doesn't make them feel stupid for learning. The town started to notice. Parents who saw my flyers in the grocery store started calling, asking if I could help their kids before the DMV test. A retired schoolteacher named Donna asked if I'd teach her how to merge onto the highway again after a fender bender scared her off it 10 years ago. And then came the call from the high school. I was sitting in my truck eating a breakfast sandwich when I saw a missed call from an unknown number. I figured it was a spam call, but something made me call back. Is this Eli Turner? Yeah, it is. This is Principal Langston over at Astoria High. We've had a few parents speak very highly of your driving instruction, and I was wondering if you'd be open to discussing a formal role. We lost our driver's ed instructor last spring. Budget cuts, then retirement. Would you be willing to come in and talk about picking it up? For a moment, I didn't say anything. Just sat there with the phone to my ear, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, wanted for who I was. Not who I was married to. Not for optics. Just me. Yeah, I said. I'd be happy to. We met in his office the next day. It smelled like old coffee and floor wax. The chairs were mismatched. His shirt collar was frayed. He looked like someone who didn't have time for pretension, which suited me just fine. We've got a classroom, 2 old beat-up sedans, and a tight schedule, he said. But the kids need this. You come highly recommended. I can't offer a fortune, but we can pay you decently through the Community Enrichment Fund. Good enough for me, I said. And just like that, I had a title again. Driver's ed instructor. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with a corner office or a company card. But it mattered. I was teaching kids a SK*LL that would change their lives, give them freedom, mobility, confidence. I watched the fear in their eyes the first time they sat behind the wheel fade into something solid. I watched them transform. And I was transforming too. The days filled up with structure. Early mornings at the garage. Mid-mornings in the classroom. Afternoons spent on the road with students. Evenings walking along the river trail with a thermos of coffee. I started recognizing people around town, not just their names, but their stories. The guy who ran the bait shop and lost his wife last winter. The woman at the hardware store who gave me free sandpaper the day she found out I was fixing up a rusted-out Civic for a kid who couldn't afford lessons. I wasn't invisible here. I was useful. Back in Denver, I'd always felt like I had to perform, to look the part, to speak the part, to keep up with Madeline's world. Her friends were kind on the surface but condescending underneath. They treated me like a novelty, the mechanic husband, as if I'd rolled straight off a reality show about blue-collar grit. I used to laugh along. Play the part. Pretend it didn't sting. But in Astoria, no one needed a performance. People here didn't ask for resumes before trusting you. They asked who your people were. If you showed up. If you stuck around. And I did. I showed up. One evening after teaching a particularly nervous student how to 3-point turn on a hill, I stopped at the diner on Main Street for dinner. I usually cooked at home, but that night I didn't want to eat alone. The waitress, Maggie, probably in her 50s, sharp as a tack, knew my order before I sat down. Turkey club, no mayo, side of fries, extra crispy, she said, scribbling on her pad. Still drinking coffee after sunset like a lunatic? Only way to live, I said. She smiled. You've got regular status now, you know? People ask about you. Is that right? She nodded. You're the guy who helped Nora pass her test after 3 fails. And the one who fixed up that old Subaru for the Miller kid when his dad got laid off. I didn't know people noticed. I wasn't doing it for points. I was doing it because it felt good. Because it reminded me that you don't need to build something big to make a difference. Sometimes a life is rebuilt through small repairs. By December, I'd bought a second car to add to the instruction fleet, a used Camry with good tires and a dent in the door I buffed out over a weekend. I paid for it out of pocket and didn't think twice. I started keeping a log of every student. Just first names, ages, fears, breakthroughs. I wrote notes next to each one. Nora, afraid of left turns. Finally made one without braking at the last second. Donna drove across the bridge without panicking. First time in 10 years. Ricky asked if he could bring his little sister next time so she wouldn't be scared at home alone. Each story grounded me. Each win, no matter how small, felt like a nail driven into a new foundation. A life rebuilt not on sand, but on purpose. One afternoon, Principal Langston pulled me aside after class. You know, he said, you've changed the way people around here think about driving. It used to be a checkbox. Now it's a confidence thing. These kids talk about you like you're some kind of whisperer. I laughed. I'm just a guy who knows how to make a car do what you tell it. Still, you've done more for them in a few months than some of their teachers have in years. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't used to praise that wasn't laced with expectation. Later that night, I stood on my porch and watched the river. The clouds were low, the air crisp. Somewhere behind me, the old stove creaked with heat. Inside the cabin, the walls were bare. I hadn't put up any photos, no trace of the life I left behind. I didn't need reminders. I had this work that mattered, people who noticed, a name that stood on its own. In Denver, I'd been Eli Turner, Madeline's husband, the guy she introduced with qualifications. He works with cars, but he's super smart. He's more of a passion project kind of guy. She never meant it to sound cruel, but it did. Every time. Here I was just Eli. No disclaimers. No corrections. And that was enough. It was a Thursday in early spring when the rental car pulled into the gravel lot behind my garage. I didn't recognize it at first, but when she stepped out, sleek sunglasses, designer flats, tailored coat, my chest tightened. Madeline. She looked exactly the same. I didn't feel the same. Eli, she said softly, I had to see you. Her eyes scanned the garage like she couldn't believe I lived in a place without espresso machines. She said she was sorry, that Jared hadn't meant anything, that she'd made a mistake. But her voice lacked weight, like she was practicing remorse instead of feeling it. I didn't get angry. I didn't even flinch. I just told her the truth. I'm not yours anymore, and I'm not who I was. She left by sundown. No tears, no scene, just silence. The kind I could live with. A year later, I stood at the front of my expanded garage, watching rain glide off the roof. The driving school had grown. 3 instructors, a wait list into next season. Locals waved when I passed. A radio segment had aired about how I helped an elderly widow pass her test. Her daughter wrote me a letter. You gave her life back. I framed it. Success wasn't Madeline's version, fancy dinners and social ladders. It was showing up. It was purpose. The pain she left behind no longer clung to me. It had shaped me, yes, but it didn't define me. The road forward was mine now.